Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear brothers and sisters and viewers of IQRA TV, welcome back to another program of Real Talk. I'm your host, Iqbal Bana. I hope you've had a wonderful week last week. The weather's getting better, and I'm sure everybody's mindset is going to be improving, and we're all going to be looking and feeling happy over the next coming days. We've got the Easter break coming up, and I'm sure people in families will be trying to get together and have a wonderful time together, and may you all have a really good time. Today, as every program that we bring to you, is something that, as I keep saying, we try and bring issues that are of interest, of concern to members of the Muslim community and others as well. Today is no different. Today I've got somebody with me that I've known for many, many years, a man who's committed to making sure that social justice and equality and diversity and access to equality and opportunity is there for everybody else. He's worked tirelessly, first as a police officer for over 26 years in the Greater Manchester Police, and after that sort of working around community issues, trying to help the Muslim community in particular navigate through the myriad of issues that they confront on a day-to-day basis. So I'm really, really pleased. He's come all the way across from Manchester. Is Yusuf Dar from the from the Community Safety Forum. Yusuf, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the program.
Jazakallah khair, wa alaikum assalam, and thank you for the invite.
Yeah, it's been quite a while actually since I've seen you. We met in Manchester and then Bradford a few years ago. You're still looking very well, still the same, still as young as ever before. Yusuf, as I said, is part of this Community Safety Forum, which is an organisation that is based in South Manchester. And I'll be asking Yusuf, can you just tell our viewers, what is the Community Safety Forum?
Well, Brother Bana, what we are is we're volunteers. There's
right.
5 main volunteers who are part of the board. On top of that, we have about 3 or 4 other volunteers.
Right.
So there's about 7 or 8 of us who do collectively the work around. All volunteers, non-funded, completely independent, non-affiliated to anybody. And our kind of ethos was, when we set up, was looking at a gap that was there in the Muslim community. The gap was around how we kind of engaged with partners around strategically
right.
in Manchester and nationally.
So when you started,
Yep.
obviously, after you left the police service,
Yeah.
you started this work. Was it sort of around, specifically around Muslim issues? Was it around mosques, institutions, Islamic institutions, around Islamic organizations that were working, living and working mainly in our communities? Or was it something that you were wanting to do with all other communities as well? Because what we want to know is, what drove you
Yeah.
to set up I keep saying Muslim Community, it isn't, it's just a Community Safety Forum.
Yes.
What drove you to set up this organization and do what you're doing? And you can explain some of the work that you've been doing in particular.
Well, the key thing was, as I said, there was a gap. There was a gap in terms of leadership and strategic kind of linkage with partners, whether it was the Home Office or the Manchester Police or the local authority. But the other things that were there was a gap in, is about trying to improve the cohesiveness within. So it was internal facing, but also external. Also, how do we work with non-Muslims?
Right.
For example, the interfaith groups. How do we engage with local government? How do we engage with the police service? How do we engage with the powers to be, whether it's the Home Affairs Select Committees?
Why did you feel that was something important?
Because in my journey through the powers of the corridors of power, like yourself, one of the things that was always labelled at the Muslim community was, where is this entity that we engage with?
Right.
And there was a clear lack of entity and grassroots engagement. There were a lot of individuals there, but in my journey through there, I thought there was a gap. And having come to Manchester and spoken to the community, the grassroots were absent from that debate. Right. And the idea of the Community Safety Forum was to look at key issues affecting the Muslim community, how we can better work with other partners outside and inside the Muslim community.
Right.
And support key areas.
As a police officer,
Yep.
having worked for over 25 years in the Greater Manchester Police Service, I used to know your previous Chief Constable, Sir Peter Fahy,
Yeah.
Who became a good friend of mine while we served together for many years on government advisory groups. I mean, as a police officer, you obviously work. Manchester is the 3rd biggest city in the country. A huge
the
population.
second, as far as we're concerned.
Well, I'm sure you probably say the second. Yeah, I think Birmingham would want to dispute that.
Yeah.
But obviously all institutions, whether it's local government,
Yeah, yeah.
regional government, whatever it is, the NHS, have got this problem about who in the Muslim community do they go and talk to. Because
Yes.
like you say, there's no singular entity.
Absolutely.
Unlike the Jewish community,
Yes.
where there may be
Yeah.
different Jewish denominations, but they all
Yes.
come together and work.
Yeah.
Was that one of the key drivers that you felt you needed
Absolutely.
to? That's
So
the gap you
when-
wanted to fill.
Absolutely. When we started in Manchester, one of the things was for example, we've got 5 or 6 different council of mosques, unlike
Right.
Bradford. They were all single entities working in silos. And we looked at that. There was no kind of internal cohesiveness in what I was talking about earlier. So the work began in trying to bring them round, and we've now got the Greater Manchester Mosques Council,
Subhanallah.
which brings across 5 or 6 different council of mosques and also non-affiliated mosques.
Right.
So we sit and discuss
So
strategic key
these
things.
the Greater Manchester area.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of people
Yeah, yeah.
see Manchester as just Manchester City, but you're talking about Rochdale, Oldham,
Absolutely.
and other towns
We're looking
around
at
it.
Bolton, Rochdale, Ashton, Oldham, South Manchester, and then Central Manchester
Right.
as well. So we've got, alhamdulillah, the communities come together. It's their work. We just facilitate the work, brother.
Right.
Bana, it's down to them.
The Bolton Council of Mosque is a very active
Yes, it
organisation
It
as well.
is.
So they're part of your
Absolutely.
structure as well. Because I know some people over there,
Absolutely.
and they've been doing some amazing and fantastic work over the many
Totally
years.
agreed. Totally agreed. Yeah, yeah.
So, because they've been going for a long time, haven't they?
Bolton Council of Mosques are probably the centre of excellence in Manchester, because Bolton have managed to have resources, and resources are key, as you know, if you're going to deliver stuff.
Yes.
And Bolton has been so well organised and had the resources and the leadership at times to deliver some key areas, and they've done some tremendous work, as have the others, to be fair to them.
Right.
They're not alone, Bolton. I think some of the others like Rochdale.
So they're
Oldham do
catching
some
up with
work.
them as well.
Yes.
Because I know, like you say,
Yeah.
they were the goals in the police terms. It's gold standard at one stage, but
Yeah, they were.
obviously the others
Yeah,
are
they are.
catching up.
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
learning from them. But you served as on the National Police Forum for the Muslim Police Officers Network.
Absolutely.
How
yeah.
long were you on that for?
I was on there for at least 6 years, but I served as a vice chair for 4 years. I served
Right.
2 terms, and then I stepped down. What I
Right.
didn't want to do is, I didn't want to do what a lot of us Muslims do. We get on the boards and then we don't want to leave.
Kursi chhodte nahi hai.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I was very supportive of that, because I'm a big believer in anything I tend to do is I try and encourage others to join. I think it's nice to have a
Right.
refreshment of those ideas.
New blood and
views.
ideas.
Absolutely.
Okay, I
Yeah.
mean, working as an ex-police officer, working with the community, and the community safety forum that
Yes.
you were doing, what type of work do you actually do? I know I've got one example is, you recently ran a governance of mosque and Islamic institutions in the Muslim Heritage Centre in
Yes.
Manchester earlier this month,
Yep.
a few days ago. I mean, that's one example. This
Yes.
is the type of work that they've been doing. And, so what other work do you do? I'll talk to you about this in a little while.
Yeah.
But what other things have you been doing?
Well, we tend to, as I said, we tend to look at key areas where we feel, in consultation with the community, that the community wants us to do.
Right.
And if there's a business case, we'll deliver. So in the past, we've delivered, for example, when remembering Srebrenica, the kind of anniversaries were coming up, we looked at doing that work. We were about to do it, got most of the process in place. Then remembering Srebrenica came along,
Right.
the organisation, and we worked with them in delivering that. We've
Right.
delivered conferences on Islamophobia in Manchester. We've delivered conferences on Daesh, far-right extremism. We've delivered conferences on other matters as well that affect the community, on things like counter-terrorism, the impact of PREVENT,
Right.
to name a few. So those have been kind of the stuff. Lately we've delivered stuff around SRE, which is sexual religious education, the new legislation.
Huge issue for the Muslim community.
Absolutely huge.
Right.
And then lately that. But it's basically what the community wants. For example,
So-
one of the things, let me just mention this, is as a region, one of the things, when I say we, I'm talking of Greater Manchester, I'm not just talking of the Community Safety Forum. As a result of the kind of work we've all started doing, we now have a cohesiveness where for the first time the Muslim community in the country can write into Home Affairs Select Committees as a single entity, going back to
Right.
what we were saying.
Mashallah, very good, yeah.
And then we can also speak to the independent counter-terrorism legislation reviewers.
Right.
We've worked with them. Max Hill came to Manchester to meet the Muslim community, and
Right.
we helped with forward thinking, facilitate that. We've also done a lot of other work around that. So that is the kind of stuff we're talking of. I mean, we could go on, but Those are the kind of things where we actually got the community to come together.
So, I mean, that is a major step forward in my view.
Yes.
How difficult was it to get the individual council of mosques, and within that, you know,
Yeah.
we may have different denominations,
Yes.
to come and actually work together? Because that's been a challenge
Yes.
for many, many areas in many, many communities.
It is, yeah.
You know, and how did you navigate through that?
Well, we had a thought about it, and one of the key things that you'll agree with me that's always a hindrance is Islamic theology,
Right.
because there are different schools of thought, and they're
Yes.
all right, in my opinion. We took Islamic theology out of our work
Right.
because we're not experts on Islamic theology. That's best left to the theologians.
Right.
We've managed to get the people around the table to discuss things that aren't theology. You know, for example, as you said, on governance, recently on security for mosques, you know, SRE. So we've taken that out, and we found that that was good, because that way we're not stepping onto the toes of the mosques and in their areas of expertise, which is theology,
Right.
and they can then work with us and trust us on our kind of views.
And how did those people who, you know, I mean, if you take this issue about governance of
Yes.
mosques, right? One of the criticisms of the Muslim community, I mean, not just the Muslim community,
Yes.
this is quite common, it happens in volunteer organizations. As you said earlier, people get into positions of power and then they are reluctant to leave it, you know. How, and did you face those challenges in the work that you do, where people were, because in order for them to work together collectively as a unit, somebody had to let go of their authority. Was that something that you found sort of a difficult task or reluctance in the community?
I think there's an old saying, isn't there, power corrupts. And there are some fantastic people on our journey and my journey. As you'll agree, in the Muslim community, there are some fabulous individuals and organisations that do the work. But equally within that, we're not blessed sometimes with individuals who are not forward thinking enough.
Right.
And probably not trusting enough to let things go to others who might be coming along. And that's one of the key challenges for the Muslim community, because when you look at the talent, and you'll agree with me, in the Muslim community, there is tremendous talent.
Oh, definitely.
You know, tremendous talent. And our view is that we need to encourage that, facilitate that talent to come through and take its place in society.
Obviously, and I think that is one of the challenges that we face. But do you see that narrative changing? Because obviously the first generation, the second generation, you know, may Allah bless them for the work that they've done. I mean, if it wasn't for the work that they did when they first came into this country, in a totally alien environment, without, in the majority of cases, not even be able to speak the language, and having established mosques and places of worship, you know, we have to thank them and thank Allah for bringing those people here who laid the foundations, you know, and the second generation built on that. Do you now see that there's a new generation emerging which is actually having a different mindset?
You're perfectly right in giving kind of a compliment and appreciation of the people, the previous generation. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be here. But round my journey through the Muslim community, and I'm sure you'll kind of amplify this, is there is a growing a level of skills in the Muslim community and a willingness to kind of take their place in the 21st century. And I think there is a move now. There is a move of the young generation to come along and take their place in society and deliver. And I think the young will probably have a better option, because we live in a more equal world now. Unlike our times, we live in a world where now the young can actually flourish more than in our times.
I mean, it just reminded me of a question. I was asked to do some piece of work by the West Yorkshire Police Force many years ago, you know, more than 22 years ago, to explore the amount of racism in the police service.
Right.
And the work that I did, you know, working with the internal organisation, threw up some really interesting sort of outcomes, results. And the Chief Constable at that time refused to publish it.
Right.
Because my report was very critical.
Right.
And I gave him about 3 months, and I said, you publish this report, otherwise I'm going to go public. I was not a police officer, so I wasn't working for them. I was an independent. I was the only independent chair appointed to carry out this research. I mean, having served 26 years in the police service, what was your experience of racism in that time? I mean, you served in the 70s, 80s.
Yes.
Where, I mean, we've seen the secret policeman in Greater Manchester Police. So I'm just turning to something different. Your experience of racism in the police service in Greater Manchester, how bad or good was it?
I think firstly, we were the how can I put it, the groundbreakers when we arrived.
Yes.
There's very few of us.
Yes.
And it was interesting isn't the right word, and I wouldn't want to repeat some of the things that I went through on the programme, but it was a journey of challenge.
Right.
And the fact that I've gone through 26 years and I'm not alone in that is testament to our resilience to go through
you
that.
have to have a tough skin.
So, for example, the point you're talking about in racism, did I encounter racism? Absolutely. How did I deal with it? I think as a Muslim, and as if people know me as you probably do, I am one of the few that I don't believe in, if there's a challenge, if I can circumvent my way around, I will try to, but if not, I will take it heads on. And that cost me a lot. Cost me a lot in terms of career, cost me in terms of health, because there was an unwillingness at the time of the organisation and some members of the organisation to challenge racism, and specifically Islamophobia, where Muslims were treated very differently.
Right.
Going back to the National, when I became the vice chair of the National, we did exactly what you said. We did a report led by Demos on the position of Muslim officers and staff in the police service. And when we did that, like you, we got really taken to the cleaners by certain high-ranking officers. There are 43 forces. There was only about 10 that actually came on board with what the report said.
Right.
The report was very damning in terms of where the Muslims were and the level of discrimination. So all the way throughout, we've challenged them, and I've challenged them, and I can give you many examples where, having been the first officer, having been to the CID where there were no Muslim officers or black officers in the CID and GM apart from one individual, by me going and challenging them, and I'm not taking sole credit, there were others who did that, to be fair, the situation changed, but it was at a cost to me because I was seen as a troublemaker, as you usually are.
Yeah.
So they were challenging times.
So you were sidelined.
Yeah, absolutely. They're challenging times.
Did that cost you in terms of promotion as well?
Absolutely.
Because you felt, you saw you as a troublemaker.
Without a shadow of doubt.
Right.
I mean, but then again, I've also equally got to say, in the journey in the police service, which mirrors society, I probably came across just as much racism in society when they saw an Asian Muslim officer turning up, and sometimes from our own.
I was just going to ask, that was going to be my next question.
Some within our own community, when I turned up, would look at me as a traitor. Some from the BME communities looked at me, and some from the indigenous community, the white community, looked at me as not befitting of a police officer.
Right.
So they were challenging times.
So you were getting it from both sides.
Yeah, there was equality there. There was real equality.
Yeah. So I mean, your experience of working with the Community Safety Forum now, you work closely with the police service, as you said.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you think that within the police service, that environment has changed, or do you still feel that there is sort of underlying racism there? Although post Lawrence that should have disappeared, but we've seen that there is, we can't deny it. And the HMIC, as it was before, which is the Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary, did a report a few years ago, which has never been published actually, around issues around racism, because I used to have close links with them in those days. Do you think that has changed, or is there still some work to be done?
Well, let me just go back to the previous point. So one of the things I missed out is, even amongst those times, there were some very good officers and leaders who showed a willingness to tackle that. And I won't name them because it's not fair. So there was that support, but not as much as now. Now the police service is, I would say, more fit for purpose. Don't get me wrong, I don't think the job has been done, or the battle has been won, but we're a long way further. For example, if I take Greater Manchester as an example, Greater Manchester last year recruited 250 Muslim officers and staff.
Wow.
Now that is a first. Because
250?
250, absolutely, yeah.
So how many of them were frontline officers?
Well, I haven't got the figures of frontline staff, but they went for officers and staff. Now, it would be unfair for me because I haven't got the exact breakdown.
I know there's a difference. For people who don't understand this, I mean, who've not worked in the service, they may not understand that. They may think they've got 250 police officers. But what Yusuf means is in total they appointed 250 people, which is really, really welcoming news.
It's massive.
It's absolutely phenomenal news.
I think Manchester leads at the moment, but
Yeah.
it also leads because of the engagement the community does with it. So within that, it's not just a recruitment, but we have senior officers now, which had never taken place before, very rarely. We've got chief superintendents who are Muslim, chief inspectors who are Muslim, and in my time, that was a rarity.
Very rare.
So Greater Manchester at the moment, for me, is the premier force.
Right.
I'm not saying that because I'm from there, but as much as I've been a critic of theirs and a thorn in their side, you've got to give credit where it's due.
Well, I think I totally accept that if they've recruited 250 staff members, both uniform and non-uniform as well, then we should actually welcome that and we should congratulate them on what they've done. But I remember the chief constable. I met him 3-4 days before the Ariana Grande sort of terrorist attack, and I must say I wrote to him after the event to congratulate him on the way he conducted himself in public about the attack by a so-called Muslim terrorist in the city of Manchester, which killed many people and injured hundreds as well. But his response to that was, I think, phenomenal. Both him and the Mayor of Manchester, I think, really worked very closely together with the community, and I think the reassurance that they gave was something that I felt really good about. And I, as I say, actually wrote to him to thank him for the way he sort of he responded.
Yeah.
So obviously, in your opinion, you see things are changing.
Well, they are. Can I just say one other thing? Some of the work we've done, and I say we as a community in Greater Manchester, is we have a strategic board that meets the police regularly. In fact,
well, I was going to say, where does the Community Safety Forum fit into that?
We kind of, once Sir Peter was there, we were early stages of starting that process. When he left, it kind of went on the back burner for a bit. Then when the new chief came along, Mr. Hopkins, they've now kick-started that following an incident that happened, a critical incident. That group is now running. That comprises not just the Community Safety Forum, but grassroots individuals, not handpicked, but grassroots individuals. And for example, what happened after New Zealand, Manchester, GMP again is a premier force in terms of how they engaged with the community in terms of reassurance, listening to what the community wanted, specifically around reassurance around mosques, leading up to Ramadan and Eid. So there's another example where the communities, in engaging with the organisations, as we said earlier, which our vision was, is to improve that partnership approach of the Muslim community.
Well, I mean, you've just raised the issue about Ramadan, and obviously it's just around the corner, and we've seen what's happened in Christchurch, and there has been a lot of fear within the Muslim community as well. The way our mosques are structured, people are fearful about what could happen. And in fact, that leads me very much into the government's new initiative. Well, not very new. It's now, this is the third year, I think, if I remember correctly, of the faiths institutions funding that they're going to be running. I'm not sure when it's going to be opened up in terms of bidding. But I was as part of the group when we first established this project, and you've been involved in promoting it as well in the Greater Manchester area. And we can talk about that as well. But obviously, mosques are vulnerable at this moment in time. We have seen an enormous growth in the far right.
Yes, we have.
Enormous growth in the far right. And there is a fear growing that Islamophobia is now past the dinner table test. It's become currency. As Sayyid Awasi said, there was a period when it was not so commonly talked about. It's now become fairly open, and we've seen that particularly when we've had this Brexit demonstrations, for the pro-Brexit group last week or the week before, where Tommy Robinson made statements and spoke on the podium from there, and all his speech was about Muslims and anti-Muslim hate. We want to come back to that. I mean, obviously, the two things I want to really talk to you about is the governance of the mosques, as far as I'm concerned, because that's a big issue. And also this issue about the Muslim safety of Muslim institutions, and the government's initiative to try and provide funding support for Muslim institutions. Any Muslim, and I've said this before on our program, the government has set aside £1.5 million for faith communities to make their premises secure and as secure and safe as possible. In the past 2 years, when I was involved in the government's advisory group, there was not a great deal of take-up from the Muslim community, and we'll talk about maybe the reasons why. But I think slowly and steadily there's a more understanding about what this funding is all about, and what it can provide. So can I just touch upon it? Am I correct? This is 1.5 million.
1.6, I think.
1.6 million.
Yeah.
Okay, that's even better.
Doubling of the previous 800,000.
Right. Okay. So let me just. We're going to go to a break. I hope so far you've found this discussion interesting. It's got a font of is a man of lots of knowledge. There's a font of knowledge there. Inshallah, we'll come back. We'll talk about Muslim institution governance of mosque and this safety issues as well.
Okay.
So inshallah, don't go away. We'll come back very soon. Take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.